14 children who perished because of a stampede. Questions are still hanging on the rafters of our minds as Kenyans, and we wonder, how could this happen? When these headlines were splashed, people were wondering how. It doesn't really, I don't follow, I don't connect with this. A stampede, how did it happen on a stairwell? Were they spooked by something? If there is a teacher who, as it's being alleged to, maybe who threatened to punish them, what really happened to corporal punishment and just doing away with it? Are we restoring that back? And what really made these children, go on a stampede, as it were, and most of them dying as it? There are lots of loose ends that we're trying to tie. Investigation is still undergoing, but we've not been really told exactly what really happened on the ground at Kakamega Primary School. This is the stairwell as it is. Is it, according to the building codes, that maybe should accommodate such a swath of, pupils that we know right now? It was around 3,000 as it is right now. Was it narrow? Were any safety precautions also taken in building this particular, of course, structure? These are questions that are still lingering on the rafters of our minds. And I just want to rope in Dr. Mustafa on this. First of all, really appalling as a nation. 14 is a huge number for the families that are affected by this, going through the grieving moment as it is, and they have questions. And do you think the government has been quick off the mark to really answer these questions?
Dibal, where children's issues are concerned, unfortunately, very few people pay attention. Perhaps it's only parents and loving parents at that pay attention to their children. If we are to go by the incident that has just happened where we have lost so many children, those are so many children trampled to death. And the other incidences of fire that happened recently here in Nairobi at Moi Girls and many other places, then it is very clear, Dibal, and politicians and leaders and those in charge of education should not be skirting around these issues, that we do not care about our children. And the fact that 3,000 children are kept in, it's okay to have 3,000 children in a school, but the fact that there is only 1 or 2 staircases, and we saw that staircase very narrow, to where 3,000 children or 2,000 children who go to class in the, have their classes in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floors would use that every day. First of all, somebody should have seen that. In terms of safety, Dibal, it is very clear, and there are not just national regulations, there are international standards and regulations that have been put in place, as I said earlier, by the United Nations agency that deals with children's affairs, UNICEF, that works very closely with governments in terms of coming up with the minimum standards of how that space, and it doesn't matter whether it's school, hospital, kindergarten, or dining hall, how it should look like. There always should be emergency exits. That is more than one. And when you are dealing with any number that is above 50, you should always have more than one emergency exit. And I don't think that is the case. Yes. Now, the second point here, Dibal, which is crucial, and I don't know what the facts are that led to that stampede, corporal punishment, physical punishment, spanking of children is actually illegal in this country. It has been, it's disallowed, it's banned by law. And that the fact that there are still teachers who actually wield the stick and punish children and scare children into running, into stampeding on each other is something that should be investigated. And if anything, we should go back to these laws that are there to make sure that they are actually enforced, so that we do not lose more children, as we have been losing children, not just in Kakamega, but in many other places around the country.
And so the question of, maybe you're not really privy to this, there was a commission, as I mentioned earlier at the top of the hour, that, not really a commission, but a task force that came up with, this was the Claire Omolo task force that came up with a report and recommendations as far as safety is concerned in schools. And I think one of the recommendations was to have also 24 hours or 24-hour CCTV cameras. We've not seen footage of all this. Maybe it's with the security personnel, they're investigating it. But right now, looking at that particular scenario, this has not been effected. Also, the school safety, the school safety policy document that was to be, actually published for every school, submitted to the Ministry of Education. That has not also been effected. And we always have these knee-jerk reactions when we have such an eye-popping figure of young children, pupils, very tender age who are dying, is when now we come with reactionary, sort of remedial measures as well. I don't know. Let's hear from Dr. Hassan Kanenja.
Yeah, Dibal, we are very good at reacting to things. We are never proactive in making sure those things don't happen in the first place, and that is the challenge. Now, I do not know what was the cause of that stampede, but when you look at the steepness of the stairs themselves, because that is all I've seen, there are certain constructions that are not meant for certain age groups or certain people. Just the same way, when you're putting up a building, you need to have a place where people with disabilities can be able to use or at least have access. But when you're constructing classrooms, you need to have a kind of a structure that can reduce potential accidents, because remember, these are kids. Just the same way, when you have kids in your own house, you're not going to let them just go down the long stairs by themselves. You're going to put in place certain mechanisms. So I think this is just willful ignorance and deliberate disrespect for procedures and regulations. Now, do I blame the teachers and the school administration? They share some blame. However, the ultimate blame for me is those people who are supposed to enforce those codes. If you cannot enforce whether it's building or construction or safety procedures as laid out by our own government or by our own ministry, then do not blame people for not respecting the law. And the same thing applies, and I'm going to say this again, a lot of times when I'm in traffic, for some reason there could be traffic police officers, but somehow motorbikes don't respect the traffic lights. And they just keep going. And so when that happens, who do you blame? In case there's an accident there, who are you going to blame? The driver, the motorbike? Because the motorbike knows, no, those laws don't apply to them. So the thing is, we actually need to enforce this. Now, going to the question of the corporal punishment, this goes to parents for me. Please discipline your children so they don't even have to be raised by teachers out there. One of the mistakes we do in this country is we substitute our parenting and outsource it to teachers. However, I cannot confirm that they were running away from being punished because I don't have complete information. We know, of course, that is illegal, even though one of the things, the climate that has also created, is there's a lot of indiscipline in schools at the same time. Now, I'm not going to say that these small kids were suffering that, but especially in high school, we've seen lots of strikes, students killing their fellow students, setting dormitories on fire and stuff like that. We need more discipline, but we need more discipline in the way we actually enforce the rules and regulations instead of being reactionary, because it's not helpful, it's killing our children, and it's shameful when adults are there and kids are dying.
But we need to bring also the county governments maybe to question as far as the school inspectorate department is concerned. When we have safety policy documents that they are supposed to get from these particular schools, do they go through them? How often do they actually check, the safety parameters within these particular schools, from the stairwell, from the fire extinguishers, congestion in the dormitories, as it were? If it's a hall, do we have the door or the doors opening outward or inwards? Because in case of emergency, then and people are coming out in force, you can just pull out the doors. These are questions. So the county government of Kakamega, they don't need to come and tell us now we have consolidated a team to try and investigate. They should tell us who were the education inspectorates that they felt and they were sleeping on the job while this is happening, because this is just an epitome of what really happens in many counties as it is right now.
Well, in any decent country, half-decent country, the person responsible would resign from his office, and an inquiry would be launched to find out what happened to those children. But you know, there's a quip that goes around in social media that in Africa nobody resigns. And I think that it's a dehumanizing statement that underwrites the idea that Africans are not good enough human beings to do things in a certain way. And I think this is part of the culture of the legacies of our state leadership that we have had for the last maybe 30, 40 years. And I think that Debal, you know, someone said there's something rotten in the state of Denmark. So our rot, Debal, does not exist only on state institutions. It starts from the individual level and moves along into our local, into our counties, and moves on as a spiral towards the very top. And I think that unless there is a cleansing of minds and a cleansing of our moral and political ethics and cleansing of how we think, I think that Debal, we're going to have more trouble coming in. We have ad nauseum here, Debal, spoken about collapsed buildings. We have talked about medical issues. We have talked about economic issues. And Debal, tomorrow morning when we wake up, that news item that happened today, yesterday, will not be a news item, and there will be no follow-up, and there will be no person in the parliament on his feet saying what has happened. And this is part of the culture that we have. And everybody wants to survive in this economy and wants to survive in this society in that way. And at the end of the day, we will pay the price. When we pay the price, I think, is when we will change.
Thank you. Brigadier, can you allow me just to take in a call, then we come to you, because they'll actually drop the calls. We have a caller who's hanging on the line. I also want to just comment on the Kakamega. Philip, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Dibal. How are you?
Very well, thank you. You make it very brief, sir.
Yes, thank you. First of all, my condolences to the Moi family and the students in Kakamega.
Yes.
My concern is, Dibal, our government is not serious. Right now, they're saying 100% transition. Go to these national schools or high schools, the dorms have beyond capacity. Now, if such a thing, even fire and all that, is going to happen, we are going to lose kids. I've just heard one of the panelists say that, you know, the disasters are going to come, that's when we will wake up. So 100% transition, honestly, and that does not make sense. Our government is not serious about education and the welfare of the teachers and students in schools. So something needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip. A good question you raised. Let's go back to Brigadier.
Diba, I want to take this to a wider perspective and indicate that very few Kenyans and very few leadership understand the issue of private and corporate security.
Private and corporate security.
Yes. And this applies across every institution in this country. Our concept of safety and security is confined to the old traditions of guns, gets, and guns. Guns, gets, and guards. In fact, the guards take the bigger picture. Once you have a guard at the gate, you are done with safety and security. That's a very wrong perspective. And because of that, most of our institutions end up not having a good safety and security plan. When you have a good, well-trained security officer, not the guard at the gate, security officer, this issue goes beyond the gates, goes beyond theft. It goes to the issue of overall security, to include the structures, the buildings, corruption, workplace violence. All that applies to security. And today, very few institutions address this squarely as required. And that's why you find that we have challenges across most of our industries.
Yes.
In fact, across industries, both even in the capitals, that they don't put much emphasis on employing the right people to do this job. And I want to suggest that right now we are trying some effort. I mentioned earlier that I'm the chairman of the American Society for Industrial Security,
Yes.
which is the most professional and high standard institution in terms of training for corporate and private security. And we end up having our officers being certified. Today in this country, there are only a handful, about 20 officers who are certified. We are now working to train much more so that we understand what this thing is. Now, the other issue is most companies, and in fact, schools and companies, don't invest in security. They don't. It's not expensive, but they don't invest in this area. You require to address the issue of guards, to address the issue of access control, the issue of intrusion detection in your camps, the issue of your perimeter fences. All this must be tied in. And the most important thing in this is to ensure that all this has got the element of a layered security, starting from the perimeter fence, the gate, all the way to the central point, the students, the children are all secured. The issue of design talks very well about stairways. In this case, we are told there were two stairways, but one was closed because there was a parents' meeting and it was reserved for them. The children were confined to only one stairway. If what I saw in the TV here is what you call the stairway,
yes,
but we are very far from it. Now, who will enforce this? Part, as you mentioned, is the county. Secondly, is the school administration. And third is the security officer, who is not there in the first place. Therefore, my point is, let's go back across board in this country and give due attention to private and corporate security as required across board and employ the right people who are in this area. The other thing is, again, which is very weak, very few of us, companies and institutions, are actually doing something called risk assessment and analysis. Where do you stand in terms of security? Unless you do that, how do you know your gaps and weaknesses? It's something very cheap that you can actually invest in, even in schools. Call an independent person who comes and does a survey for you across from the perimeter fence up to the high-value unit you have at the center of that institution.
Thank you.
It won't cost you much, but it will make a very, very big difference in terms of how we address issues of private and corporate security.
Thank you, Brigadier. Let's hear from Ambassador Rasas Mwancha.
I think what the Brigadier said is very important. We have said here in this very forum that if you visit some of our schools and look at the learning environment, the other day I went to a secondary school here. I don't want to name it here because that's not good culture. And then there was a time there was need for call of nature, and I was told, okay, you go to the staff room. I mean, when I walked in, it was impossible to even try. I had to think of even what the school, the kids' environment will be. So when we are talking of learning environment, it is not only the physical security, but even the keeping the environment. If you look at that school, outside the gate is all dusty. I wonder what it is like during dry season. And yet Kakamega is a rainfall area. So if learning, I went to school where I was taught to use my hand, to use my head, and also to train you spiritually. The education now we are giving our children is to pass CPE, whatever it is, examination, and the education doesn't teach them to be conscious of the environment. I don't want to come back again. Let me just say one parting shot, and particularly for the late President Moi, because I worked with him. He was my chairman when I was Secretary General Comesa. In fact, he helped me get that position because he campaigned for me and also, supported me very much. Behind it, when you met Moi one-to-one, you saw a father. But then, of course, as I said before, the politics was different. But as we mourn him, let us learn the good he did and also taming us the bad that he was exposed to.
Thank you. Professor Naomi Damba.
Bal, when I take my children to school in America, I watches everything. Is the gate working? Is the door opening the right way? Is the bathroom equipped for the children? Are the doors wide enough? And I take a note of that. And if I'm not happy, I make a phone call. So, based on what Brigadier say and what Ambassador said, one lesson for Kenya is don't leave this alone to the government to solve. It is for all of us. You see something, say something. And the school has the responsibility to record all the complaints. And it needs to be accumulated. And we cannot afford to have Moi Girls, and now Kakamega, and now another one, and then we disappear like warthogs, waiting for another surprise to happen. It must stop.
Right, thank you. Let's just give our headline thoughts. Hassan Kanyenje, briefly, 30 seconds. I'm being chased out of the studio right now. 30 seconds.
As we reflect on the challenges faced under the former president and the contributions he made to this country, and given the current political environment, let's be wary of cosmetic reforms and changes for political expediency, because putting lipstick on a pig does not make it a supermodel. It still remains a pig.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Mustafa,
Yeah,
30 seconds.
I think the warthogs that Professor Mindaba is talking about are the politicians. And the nauseating thing, Dibal, here is that the funerals of these children is going to be turned to a political rally by those warthogs. But we are watching.
So the warthogs have heard. Let's hear from Brigadier.
For me, I
30
would
seconds.
suggest that the best to celebrate President Moi is to make sure that our future governance is done in the right way in serving our population. And secondly, for the Kakamega incident, I want to offer my services, at no cost to any institution to run risk assessment and analysis at no cost to them, at no cost, to make a difference in this country.
That's important. It bears repeating. Just for them that are listening, again, just go. Just make that statement again.
I want to say again, based on what happened in Kakamega and the fact that there are very few Kenyans who are certified in security,
Yes.
and I'm one of them actually at the highest level, I want to offer my services to this country, to any institution that wants to have a risk assessment and analysis done on the entire spectrum of security for institution at no cost.
At no cost.
I'm ready for that.
All right, and of
Thank
course
you.
we shall facilitate how they can go and get your contacts as well. Okay, Ahmed Ashif, 30 seconds.
From the Maasai community, Asheo Ling, President Moi. Rest well.
Thank you. Ambassador Rasas Moincha, you gave your closing remarks.
didn't mind, but I don't
Thank you.
want to.
All right. Okay.
All of us need to learn the lesson of